Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for African News with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Nigeria's Super Eagles will be hoping to carry the day in their World Cup opener against Iran. That's happening now with a goalless draw on the horizon. Also making their tournament debut later tonight is Ghana, who'll be facing down their old foes, the US. We get the halftime round-up from our team in Accra. Also, the cleanup continues in a Kenyan coastal town rocked by a brutal attack by Shabab militants. The Somali extremists killed dozens after hunting down their victims by going door to door, singling out non-Muslims and men. And almost exactly 2 months after Boko Haram extremists abducted hundreds of girls from a school in northeastern Nigeria, the hunt for the missing children continues, as does the group's campaign of violence. First up, though, it's a big night for Africa in Brazil. At least it is when it comes to football. Two of the continent's 5 World Cup teams are playing their tournament openers. In Group F, Nigeria's Super Eagles are currently facing Iran in Curitiba. Neither side's managed to score a goal yet, and the game's close to finishing. It could be the tournament's first draw. Meanwhile, anticipation's building as in a little over an hour's time, Ghana will be taking on the US in Natal. Well, for that game, Katerina Vitozzi is in amongst Ghanaian fans at the World Cup Village in central Accra. She joins us now. Katerina, hundreds of people have already headed over ahead of kickoff in a little over an hour. No doubt there's a pretty exciting atmosphere there ahead of it.
Yeah, excitement and a great deal of nervousness, as you can imagine, at this fan park. This is one of the many venues that Black Stars fans will be heading to this evening to watch this debut game from their team in the World Cup tournament. Now, if you were missing the sound of vuvuzelas from last year's tournament in South Africa, don't worry, because the Black Stars fans here in Accra this evening will be providing that soundtrack to you. This game has been the only thing on everyone's lips across the capital today. Everywhere you go, everyone you speak to, there are T-shirts being sold of the World Cup Black Stars heroes. Every stall is selling a vuvuzela. Everyone is very excited, but there is a real sense of tension that this is the game that the Black Stars think and believe they should win, and it's the one they really need to win, bearing in mind that their next games are against Germany and Portugal. So fans here, fingers crossed, they've got their vuvuzelas ready. It's going to be a really exciting game.
Thanks very much. Katerina Vitozzi there, keeping an eye on Ghana's progress for us in their debut game for the World Cup. Thanks, Katerina. In other news, Somali extremist group Al-Shabab has claimed responsibility for a massacre in the Kenyan town of Mpeketoni, in which at least 48 people were killed. The hours-long assault began on Sunday night as residents were watching World Cup matches and continued until early Monday. Dozens of militants descended upon the town and began executing locals. Witnesses say that the gunmen literally stalked their prey over several hours. We're joined now by Hannah McNeish in Nairobi for us. Hannah, we're hearing some pretty disturbing details about the tactics used by the militants in the attack.
Yes, I've been speaking to witnesses today that said that this was an 8-hour-long attack, that men arrived. They first attacked a hotel and burnt it down, then went to a guest house where one witness said he saw men being dragged out and their throats slit. He said that they were selecting men, sometimes killed in front of their wives and children, and telling wives and children this is revenge for what Kenyan troops are doing in Somalia. He said that no security forces came until the morning, and that many people tonight were sleeping outside of the town, despite it being calm, because they were just still in fear.
Hannah, the groups warned that it's going on what it's saying is a righteous offensive because it's doing so in the name of Muslims, it says, are being persecuted by Kenya.
Yes, the group released a statement today saying that this was revenge for the assassination of some Muslim clerics on the coast, and also for the treatment of Somalis under Kenyan troops who've been fighting in Somalia since 2011. They also said that the notion of Kenya as a place of peace and stability was a distant mirage, and they warned international tourists not to come. They called Kenya a war zone, and they said said that if people came, they would suffer the bitter consequences. So this is yet another blow for the Kenyan tourism industry, which has been rocked by warnings and other attacks in the last few months.
Thanks very much, Hannah McNeish, there for us in Kenya. In Nigeria, Islamist extremists continue to terrorize the northeast. Boko Haram militants are believed to have killed at least 22 people in Daku in an attack that began on Sunday. Now, it's not far from Chibok in Borno State, where almost exactly 2 months ago, the extremist group abducted hundreds of girls. The fight for their return continues.
On April the 14th, Boko Haram attacked a school in the remote village of Chibok in northern Nigeria. The Islamist group, whose name means Western education is forbidden, kidnapped 276 girls. 2 months later, they're still missing.
We are calling on our government in a way of accountability for the social contract that government has with citizens to play and live up to that responsibility.
In a video released shortly after the abduction, the leader of Boko Haram threatened to sell the schoolgirls as slaves. The mass abduction triggered global condemnation, as well as criticism of the Nigerian government's slow response. Boko Haram has stepped up its insurgency since the abductions. Bombings have killed hundreds of people. Nigeria has accepted foreign help in the hunt for the girls, including US drones and surveillance planes. But there are fears that an armed response would put the girls' lives in danger, and talk has turned to negotiations.
We are pleading with the international community to prevail on Nigerian government to bury its pride, agree to the demands of the insurgents that their detained members should be released in exchange for the release of the kidnapped girls.
While some of the girls have escaped, 219 remain missing. As time goes on, the call to bring back our girls is getting even harder to answer.
Hamas continues to plague Central African Republic, even as the EU announced today that its 700-strong peacekeeping force is finally fully deployed in Bangui. Meanwhile, Doctors Without Borders has denounced the systematic targeting of civilians by armed groups throughout the country. Thousands have died and nearly 1 million people have fled their homes in the chaos unleashed after the mainly Muslim Seleka rebels launched a short-lived takeover last year. Now, many of those driven from the country are children. Our Jessica Lemazurier spoke to the West Africa director for the UN's Children Agency, UNICEF, about some of the challenges faced by the youngest victims of Central African Republic's crisis.
I'm joined here by the Regional Director for West and Central Africa, Manuel Fontaine. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Manuel, tell us just how bad is the situation for children in the Central African Republic?
We've got dozens of children who have been killed. We have evidence of that. Hundreds have been injured, and they have been directly targeted in many ways. I've myself been there many times, seen children who had scars and were directly targeted by violence. Many of them have been recruited, between 6,000 and 10,000 have been recruited in the conflict. And of course, there's the whole impact of services collapsing, malnutrition, lack of access to basic health care.
And why is it that this crisis is so underfunded?
Well, for some reason, we seem to have some difficulty keeping the attention on it. I think there's the sense that this violence is senseless and people don't really necessarily understand. But I think it's important to give the message that not only this is a terrible crisis, but in addition, there's a lot of things that can be done about it.
So what does need to be done?
What needs to be done is obviously receive all those children in the malnourished children. We've already received more than 9,000 in severe acute malnutrition treatment centers. It's providing water, it's providing non-food items, it's receiving them when they cross the border and need shelter and need refuge. And it's also trying to trace the families of those children who were separated from their families.
And what hope is there for the situation improving?
We have at the moment the troops, African Union troops. We will have a UN peacekeeping operation on the ground in September. We have great hopes for that to stabilize the situation, but the humanitarian emergency is going to last a lot longer than this.
Manuel Fontaine, the Regional Director for West and Central Africa, thanks very much for joining us here on France 24.
Jessica Lemazurier there for us in New York. Well, finally, we head to Morocco, the 20th edition of the World Festival of Sacred Music in Fez. Amongst a host of musical superstars were Johnny Clegg and Youssou N'Dour, who together delivered a medley paying tribute to the late South African anti-apartheid icon Nelson Mandela. The show fell on the day that the politician's family marked the traditional end of mourning, 6 months after his passing in December. Well, I'll leave you there. Join me again tomorrow when I bring you more news from across the African continent. Take care.